The Dwarven Guardian, written by J.T. Williams. Copyright J.T. Williams 2023. Part 1. Hammersongs. Redstone quarry, blackstone ore. Melt it, smelt it, pound it more. Icy river cools the fires, kindling dwarven lust desires. Haradar, the dwarven hold, hammersongs, fierce and bold. Destroy our foes with crack and crush. Drink some ale and into battle rush. Do not fall back. Forward charge! Smash our enemies small and large. Dine within the halls of blood. Send them all to the gods above. Axe blow, hammer fall. Shield smite them to the ground, until the gods call us back, with horns and drums to forever sound. Songs of Haradar. Stones quake in the twilight of sunrise. I stand with my brothers, shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield. We are dwarves of Haradar, the stronghold of stone. Our enemies struck us with transgressions beyond just mere warfare. A wicked sickness strikes all people of magic, and our hope for a cure is fading. But it does not matter. We will not cede our ground. The lower ranks of our army marches forward, a curtain of dust rising from their boot stomps. The valley is on fire, and the smell of bloody iron fills my nostrils. I am Nurokas, Hammersong of Haradar. My father fell in the elf wars in the last age, and now times have become as such that elf and dwarf stand beside one another in combat against a greater enemy. The legions of men and their grand protectorate encircle us. Our holy places are laid to waste. Our bodies ache from combat, unceasing like the undulating waves of the glacial seas. Last night, the forward guards failed to report with the sign of torchlight flashed toward the mountains. This was a signal repeated every moment the moon clock's shadow changed, as a way to assure the perimeter was holding. When the torches went dark, my brothers and I were called forth. Approaching the Tower of Sight, the westernmost point of our line, we found that vile men had taken to it. We made every breathing man choke on our axe heads with ease. But it was beyond the tower. In the far distance, we spotted the banners of the enemy approaching with all of their strength. Now, that enemy, in its vileness, villainy, a horrid virtuous fallacy, march against us. Horns sound, and my brother dwarves engage the line of the aggressors as we hammersongs have taken to a far right flank. I hold my hammer firmly, and with a tune in the air as the runes of power echo the song of our people, I raise it ready to strike. I feel the power in my armor as the earth under my feet brimmed with energy invigorates me. My helmet, strapped under my chin, curls my vision around the nose guard, but does not drown out the potent smell of rotting flesh this valley has seen for some time. This attack is not new, only a fish swimming between two ponds with a narrow river of taken and taken back rocky earth. The siege has gone on for months. "Hail, Hammersongs!" cry our brothers. We were the most elite of our kind. Our adversaries were beneath us in every way. Those feeble men, in their tight formations like cowardly mice or a river turtle. Once you crack the shell, in single combat, they are nothing. The horns sound down the lines. They retreat, and a last one of the men fall down before me, caught by the throwing axe of one of my brothers. "You cursed creature!" it says to me. "Away! Let me die away from you." I abide part of his wish. I cleave his head from his body, spurting blood all over the ground. Upon the broken spear shaft left by his brothers, I impale his head and stand it on the road. The legions are retreating for a time. I turn to my brother dwarves and then look at my fellow hammersongs. Not one of us is without anguish or disgust. Our people suffer greatly at the quelling of a sickness, a curse against magic. The world of men means to exterminate us in the belief that magic has become a harbinger of death to the world. They feel the world is not meant for the likes of us anymore. I care little of their feelings. "Nurokas," I hear behind me. I turn to see a Grand Master of our order. His black armor from the deep pits of Haradar is the strongest of our kind's creation. Master, great work upon the fields of battle, but I have a need for you in the city. We must speak immediately. I follow him up the grand stairwell of the mountain, between the two rivers of life that flow from the pools near the upper keep of our grand city. It is here the lights of the dwarves shine brightly, as a symbol of our resolve, even as the now barren land burns and weeps the blood of our people. I enter, following my master and dwarves busy running back and forth, gathering supplies for the soon-to-be returning battle lines. They bow before us. "Hail, Hammersongs," they say. In typical fashion, we do not respond. Hammersongs are the nearest to the high-born dwarves as one can be. My master looked to me. "We go to the hall of Rornacor. I tell you something that you do not wish, but you must do for all of us. You will be leaving with his young one." "The boy? Leaving to where? The enemy is upon us. My hammer would do well to remain here against the enemy," I protest. He shook his head to me. "The enemy will not leave, and it will be with great sacrifice we will fight to defend Haradar, but the elves have summoned a plan. Even now, our forges are bright and hot, crafting a great tool to protect our worlds. Do you know of the mountains of the far north and our kin the snow dwarves?" I nod. They are reclusive and do not love battle as we do. "They have prepared a place for us of magic, a place we will be safe from the sickness. Both Rornacor and his wife shall remain here for our people, but you are to take their son to safety in the north. There is more," he says, putting his hand on my chest. "Be watchful. There will be elves to the west, a small group of them, but I have seen in the workings of the priests of Throka, they are a key. If you come upon a group of elves traveling as you, I charge you to work with them in whatever way you must." I nod. "Yes, master." "Good, and nothing of this to Rornacor or his wife. Know that elves and dwarves move towards darkness, and we must keep hope in whatever way we can." The high ceilings of the inner halls of the mountain glow with the torches lining the pillared walkways. Had we proceeded forward from the main gates, we would have descended to the great hall and a fine ale, but it was not to be this day. The families of high-born dwarves of regard like Rornacor and his clan are kept well and in their own halls. Rornacor has only been in Haradar since his son began his studies of mining and axe work. Rornacor is a man of honor and was once a simple dwarf born without wealth. He now commands a vast number of our mountain guards, but for me to be summoned personally to care for his son is an honor. The boy wishes to be a Hammersong, though. I tell him at just over 30 years in age he is too young. We come to a large door with two strong dwarves standing at the sides. The door is opened, and I see into the home of Rornacor. He sees me at once. "Nurokas!" He embraces me. "It is well you have come." With a smile, he looks at me. I have told him, but he has not taken it well. I do hope you can liven him up. I only just know of it. He's a good dwarf to wish to stay, to defend his home. The young dwarf sits by the fire, his axe on his back, his normal school of mining far from his mind as I walk past the fair wife of Rornacor. "Master Hammersong," she says to me. "My lady, it is well to be in your home." She touches my arm as I pass and then gasps, "You are injured." I look down to where she touches and see a gash in my arm. Their boy looks up at me. My armor, normally shining, is dirty with muck and dust. There is blood splatter on my arms. I have trained him for years now in fine axe work, but he has never seen me in the condition I am now. I look back toward his mother. I am well. Many with injuries worse than mine exist. I look again at the boy. "Slatnikor, you are going with me, young one." He looks up at me with the glare of a young child with tears in his eyes and a red face. "Do you weep for your absence to battle?" "Of course, master." The boy's eyes scan to his mother and father, and he looks back down. It is only nature to miss one's parents, but the boy has a strong mind and is stalwart even in his younger years. I can see past his words, but he is well to keep clear thoughts. Rornikor pulls me to a side room where my master has joined him around a great table. A map is before us, and dimming candles flicker in the corners of the room. Nurokas, we have prepared a way for your escape with my son. So lucky would others be to have this way as well. There are many children too young to fight, and elder dwarves too old. We have a way, said my master. A host departs this night through the Dwarven tunnels to meet up with the elves of Narisond. They, too, will make the journey you do, but upon a different path, and under an elven invisibility spell, they will move in secret. I will be with them as a small guardian contingent. And you, Master Rornikor, I ask him. My wife and I remain here to defend Haradar. A solemn look is in his eyes, but I cannot tarry on the thought of his personal suffering. I will take care of your son. I know. That is why I requested you, for your journey north will not be with ease, but we have prepared a way to make the journey simpler. He points to the map. The northern road up to the rocky cape. A boat will await you to take you west. From there you will head toward the edge of Taria. The tunnels will take you under the bay and speed your path north. You will enter the city from beneath the mountains. Do the others journey this way too? They go the direction you do, but will come from the south, following the Tikan Mountains. The road through Taria will lead them to an elvish holy place, and from there they will use another spell to move everyone at once to Elenathrond. So indeed, the snow dwarves have prepared a place for all races? Elenathrond shall be our salvation. Rornikor goes to a shelf and pulls down 3 mugs. A tapped keg sits near a fireplace against the far wall. He pours us each an ale and sets them on the table. I take mine and put it to my mouth. The foam atop it buzzes my nose, and I drink a hearty mouthful. I am disheartened by our path. Is there no hope in defense of the mountain? Our numbers have dwindled down from tens of thousands to no more than 6,000 axes. Rornikor chugs his ale and then slams it down. Those 6,000 will move south with our hope in the future. Great deeds need doing in the coming week, and the gods have smiled upon us. Etha, the goddess herself, is with the elves, and Wura has given his signs in the polar lights over Elenathrond. Safe we will be kept, and in death many of us will find honor. Haradar will be abandoned? I ask. Rornikor stares at me. Hammersong, I know you will not let harm come to my son. He is a key to our future, chosen by Disi and the greater one, Throka. The dwarf god and the one of the mountains? Who has interpreted these signs? I ask. It was a sign in his birth that Disi would smile upon him in time, says my master. We must keep him safe and see that one day he is able to carry the fate of our people forward. But all steps to this future have not been completed. We must outlast the enemy, not only men, but also the Itsu gods. They are weakened, but we do not know what has come upon the god of war, Kel. We fear he may be dead, or worse, taken by the enemy, if you can believe such ludicrous ideas. We live in dark times, brothers, I say to them. I will protect the boy with my life. Then you must leave soon, before they attack again. We go back to the hall, and I spot Slatnikor with his mother, his eyes now fresh with tears. You will be fine with Nurokas. He has taught you well. Slatnikor rubs his eyes. But you do not come with me? I cannot. We must remain here to assure you can get to safety. We will follow when we can. The boy grips his mother. Please, Mama. I walk up behind him and touch his shoulder. Slatnikor, are you ready, boy? Is your axe head sharp? And did you oil it as you were supposed to? Sharpened before morning light, master. He turns to me, standing as tall as he can, his axe catching both glimmers of torchlight and the glimmer of his mother's tears. Tell your parents goodbye. He embraces his mother but pulls away quickly. His father awaits him and grips him tightly. "Keep your stance wide when you swing your axe. I do not want you to lose balance," he tells him. "I will, father." The boy walks toward me, and I look at the others. "We will depart for the northern shore, and I do wish you grace in your efforts." With that, we depart. I begin down the passage, Slatnikor just behind me. "We will go to my room first," I tell him. Passing back past the main gates, the passages twisted and turned, delving deep into the mountains. It is past the training grounds of the Haradar dwarves and into the inner sanctum of the Hammersongs that I am leading him. A grand statue of Disi, his axe of jewels and gold replicated in near perfection, looks down upon us. Leaving this early hour in haste for the battle lines, I had left my room in an organized shamble. I am weary even now, but as we enter my abode, sleep is not on my mind. I gather up some personal parchments and a few of my own belongings, tossing them in a sack. I grab cloaks to help veil our passage and toss one to Slatnikor. He puts it on over his armor but says nothing. I gather rations of dried meat from my bag. "Did your parents pack you food?" "Yes." One less worry for myself. I douse a lit candle and take a last look into my room. I fear I will not return again to Haradar. We go back toward the main gates, and it is there in the distance I see the boy's parents. Rornikor holds his wife and stares toward us, but I do not think Slatnikor sees them. I push him on outside. It is better that way. From the battle plains come a host of dwarves from the front. Their eyes are weary, their bodies busted and bleeding. Haradar welcomes them home and will care for them. I am but a dwarf myself, but within my sight I see many smiles. I do not like to think of it, but more than a few hold the Hammersongs to some kind of reverence to gods in battle. As I tell the young one with me when we train, I am a dwarf like all others. We go down the stairwell and then cross a bridge upon reaching the valley. The early morning sun gives sight to carrion birds in droves diving upon the bodies of the fallen. Too much loss of life in these past few days, but I look outward to the watchtowers, seeing torches burning brightly. We push the legions back, and the dogs will be licking their wounds for some time. As the sun crosses the sky above, we walk with the mountains at our side. The northern road leads only to the shore and vastly unoccupied land. The tundra is barren, and a sharp wind blows upon me, a tingling I feel on my face. Slatnikor hasn't spoken since we left, but I do not give validation to his sadness. He must be strong. The far edge of Haradar ground is coming up. The bridge of Raknor River is the edge. We have not been this way but once. Do you remember it? It was late at night, Master. Do you remember what we did? We had practiced axe strikes from atop the bridge. The water was cold, but you told me to strike the boulder in the stream until it cracked. I leaped from that bridge more times than I can remember. 37 times. Do you know why I remember that number? I do not, Master. Because when I did the same test many years ago, it took me 38. I notice with my words, the boy seems to brighten up in stature, and a small glow returns to his face. He is not a prideful dwarf, but he deserves this pride and a bit of fib. In truth, it took me 45 times jumping into that frigid water. It is no matter. Dwarves do have a nature to stretch the truth, just a bit. We approach the bridge, now well alone, and without the aid of Haradar if we need it. I look upon the bridge and notice a body lying in the middle. Careful now, Slatnikor. I pull an axe from my waist and point for him to do the same. I walk up to the body and notice it is one of 3. The neck of this man is slashed, and looking upon his garb, I see he is most definitely of the legions. I spit at the body, and then look at the other 2 slumped against one another near the bank of the river. Their necks, too, have been slashed, and they are lying in a pool of their own congealed blood. We reach the opposite bank, and I scan the underbrush. I hear a whistle meant to be as a songbird, but that bird is not native to this region, particularly at this time of year. Slatnikor, watch your axe. The brush rattles and I spot a form. I toss my hand axe and it clings as a blade parries it to the side. Master Hammersong, hold your attack, a voice says. From the brush comes an elf, a bit of an odd finding of all creatures I expect to emerge. Years ago, this would have been a fight like no other, but these days we are friends. What news from Haradar? He asks as he returns his silver blade to his sheath. We have been under attack for the past weeks. They cannot hold their siege for longer than an hour, so we have done well. The issue now is that our numbers dwindle. As it is in Narisond, or so the birds have told me. The elf whistles again, and another elf emerges from across the road. This one is just like the first, except he is holding a bow. As they stand next to one another, I can tell they are brothers. 2 elf brothers away so far north? The first one smiles, looking at the other. Indeed, we had journeyed north, seeking a treasure of old, the bow of true song, greatest elven archer to ever draw back an arrow. Chasing fables, then? I say. Ha, fable! Dear dwarf, all respect, but when this war is over, we will need to drink and have a conversation about fables. There is silence for a moment, and the 2 elves come before me and bow. If a time comes, we would be honored to have such a conversation. We must get back on the road. I would avoid this way. More of them are coming from the northernmost point. If that is where you head. Close to it, I say, but we head west. We are bound for Taria. Good journey to you, then. Have faith in our gods that we will survive this darkness. I watch as the 2 elves cross the bridge and then begin into a sprint south. They have many more nights to get to their homelands. I hope those homelands still exist when they get there. I look back to Slatnikor. The boy is twiddling with his axe. Much has changed with our alliances with the elves. Those we once called enemies are now some of our few friends. Stop twirling your axe and come on. We proceed down the barren path toward a fishing village on the shoreline. It is a simple enough place with several cottages just off the road and drying racks on a western hill not too far from the water itself. For many years we traded wares for fish and helped out those who worked the waters of this region. There was one time a rather large dragon kept eating their nets that took quite a few axe blows to take down. Ever since, we have made a point to keep dwarves nearby to protect them during their harvests. Those dwarves were chased out some time ago, but after much inspection, it was determined that it was because of a Grand Protectorate spy causing dissension. We understand that he had an unfortunate accident, slipping from the dock and slicing his throat on a broken oyster shell. Oh, how random of an injury. The village is ahead. It is quaint, and I see no sign of legionnaires in the vicinity. It seems that for now, we are good and safe. We go to Taria? Slatnikor asked. Yes, but do not speak of that here. I will not, but I remember reading about dwarves in the Tychen Mountains and through that region. I nod. At one time our race was plentiful, but much has happened since then. Remember, trust only those who prove worthy of your trust. That is what wisdom I can give you as of now. We move cautiously to one of the fissures. I kneel down and hide behind the edge of a wooden hut. I whistle and get the attention of one of them. The man turns and spots me. He glances around and then runs toward us, sliding to a stop and out of breath. They have men here, he says. Too many to deal with, and it is easier if you stay hidden. He pushes us into the cloth-covered hut. How did they not see us approaching? How did we not see them? The man looked at him. Their attention is to the north. I will tell you at first glance. They look as we do, but their armor is nearby. They wait for others in a plan to move against Haradar, and I will not point them out other than to say they are behind me. We must be very careful. Are you the one to give us passage across the narrow waters? I am now. It was my father who had met with the dwarves a few nights before. He has since disappeared. I shake my head. I'm sorry for your loss. We have had many, the man replies, pushing off his tears. These bastards are nothing more than that. They care nothing of anyone. I will get you to the passage. We all plan to leave at some point, but we do not wish to risk it before the legions come through. They will hunt us down if we all go, but I think I can sneak out with you. We will do what you suggest, I say to him. We will leave at nightfall, no sooner. He pushes a large tarp covering to us. This is a shack no one really uses. You should be safe here. I will come get you in time. Part 2. Sacrifices. It is just now midday. I have never felt so trapped. As Slatnikor and I lie here for hour after hour, we keep the shroud over us to assure we are not seen. For the moment, it seems to be working. The ground is cold. The nearby shoreline has begun to quake as a winter storm moves over us. The howling wind tears through the camp. It is clear why few use this shack. Other than a few random tools and empty barrels, it is one of many that are simply too close to the water at this time of year. The other huts we can make out are built with sod roofs and down into the ground. The smell of the wood fires is nauseating, considering the rancid smell of fish guts nearby. I watch the different men walking around. Most are busy moving nets, cleaning fish, or doing other tasks. But there are a few men not doing anything. They are plain-clothed enough, but their hair is cut and short, not straggly. Their faces are well-shaved, and their eyes scan the rest of the camp. Those are some of the legionnaires. The path they had taken is not at all watched, and it is obvious why. They are scared. They frequently move to look up the road for their brothers in arms. They wait for the rest of the legion to arrive. Night is coming. As the sunlight begins to fade away, I look down at Slatnikor. He is shivering but sleeping for the moment. I think about how much my opinion changed for the child. He was sloppy, held an axe like it was a chore, and came from a life unlike the common dwarf. But he had promise. His father had well-earned riches, and he wanted better for his son. It is still surprising that such a dwarf would have a son that was not as others, and holding a hammer in hand as he learned to walk. Perhaps he wished his son to not know war. That is not very dwarven, but I cannot guess at his ways. Now, none of that matters. I must get Slatnikor to safety, no matter the cost. Something is happening in the camp. I see the men I believe to be legionnaires make a motion to one another and point. The man who had come from before to help them came running toward the tent. "They are coming, the legion! We must get to the boat now!" He rips the coverings off of us, and I pull Slatnikor to his feet. He shakes his head and looks around. His hand goes to his axe. "Good," I say, "but not yet. Breathe. We have no need for that." The sun is close to setting. With a darkening purple sky above, we move to the shoreline and a dock. There is a single boat and a paddle. The man pushes a map into my chest. "I cannot follow. I cannot take you." "What? The agreement was for you to take us. I have little knowledge of the north. Most of the dwarves from this region were killed years ago." "I am sorry, Master Hammersong. I assure you that you can make your way around the cape near Srone and get to the shores near Locum without me. I must take care of my own." I look past the man and see a young woman peering out from a tent. There is a small child with her. "We all fear the coming darkness," he says. "They burned our home in the tundra lands. I brought them here. I must protect them. I was trying to find a way to hide them with you two, but now it will be as it is. I will beg for our lives, and perhaps they will show mercy. Or, at least we will be together." I look beyond the camp and see the banners blowing in the ever-increasing winds. The Legion has arrived. "Thank you," I tell him. The man smiles and nods with a very quick motion. There are tears in his eyes. "Now, into the boat! Quickly, quickly!" We stammer into the boat and pick up the paddles. "Follow this shoreline and then turn west. You will find the map easy enough to follow. You must hurry away from here. I nod, and the man backs up further. I push us from the shoreline and begin into the more open water. Slatnikor has some experience navigating rivers, so we have that as a good thing for us. The man walks back toward the camp as we paddle away. We're making good speed. The water crests before us, and the boat glides effortlessly. The tide is in our favor, and our escape has gone unnoticed. Do those at Haradar expect an attack from the west? Slatnikor asks. They do not, but they will see them coming from the bridgeway. We have defenses within the roads to assist our warriors. Do not fear for them. Can we not send a bird with a message? There have been no birds in our region for some time. Our god Throka has sent them into hiding to protect them. We must keep faith that we will suffice without them, and that our loved ones will remain within the mountain, unhurt by our enemy. He is silent for a moment, and then stops paddling. I get to live? It was a solemn and sad-sounding question. I pause for a moment. Your parents do what they are not ready for you to do. You will have your time when you hold your own axe at swarming odds and crack the skulls of your enemy as you have trained. We must get you to safety first. We must do as my master and your father has commanded. There is a sudden bright shine of fire behind us. I turn and watch as the huts of the camp go into flame. I can still make out the man who had helped us, his wife, and his child. There are many others being stuck down in the camp. In the pale light of night, I see their shadows fall even from this far away. There are wails in the air, and I witness the death of our helper. His wife clings to their child, and they pull them apart, chopping them with their blades. A tear falls down my cheek. I have such desire to simply jump to the shoreline and deliver those bastards what they deserve. A Hammersong does not run like this. We do not avoid battle. I look to Slatnikor, who is shocked and glaring at my face. I force further tears away and exhale. No time for this either. We reach the edge of the shoreline as it turns west and east, opening up to the glacial seas. The small boat we are in is pulled forcefully into the waves, and suddenly I wish it was not a storm that I saw on the horizon. We paddle forcefully, pushing our way along the shallows as the waves threaten to overturn us. This boat is not made for these waters, especially this rough. The cliffs rise up to our left. The ocean is too hazardous for such a vessel as the massive storm pushes to shore. I see an inlet and tap Slatnikor on the back. We go there. We do not need to continue to try this. It is folly. We guide our vessel into the narrow inlet. There is water surging around us. I see a gravel bank that leads up away from the ocean. As our boat grinds against the shore, another wave strikes us from behind, nearly rolling us. We scurry from the boat and up the shore. I unsling my axe and point forward. I do not know what might hide here. Our enemies are everywhere. The gusts from the ocean spray a salty, wet wind upon us, and lightning flashes behind us. I see a rocky outcropping, a decrepit watchtower from the olden days when the people of the island nation still were upon these shores. This was something of the Old Kingdom, that which existed before the Grand Protectorate. The structure is cold and dark. The stonework has many cracks, but sitting atop the lone hill battered by years of storms and cruel winds, a portion of it has remained intact. It will work for us this night. I enter the blackness and discover that it isn't very big. There is a small rat that scurries out the front door, causing Slatnikor to jump. Come on now, it is just a rat! Though long abandoned, I find the wreckage of an old bed and a table. The fireplace is covered in cobwebs, but the flume is clear, albeit more debris falls from it as I check to make sure. I soon get a small fire going, rubbing my hands at the heat. Slatnikor does the same. He is covered in chills. Did you not bring your coat of phoenix feathers? I did not think to. I simply have my traveling cloak. I rub my hands together over the fire. He is on the outside, closest to the door. Switch with me, then. We shuffle positions, and he lies against the rock, staring into the fire. He rubs his finger on the masonry. Who built this? The old kingdoms, I reply. Back in the days of antiquity, before the sickness, before the fall of the western kingdoms. There was an orc war, right? There were two, actually. This was the second one, and it was more of a battle than a war. That was the first open move of the Grand Protectorate against us of magic. The elf armies of the Varmark woods were destroyed in but a single night. There were many dwarven cities to the west, but most fell well before then. One of the grandest was Micronach, and few know the truth of what happened there. It is hard to think of all of this, Slatnikor. Some time ago, it became too dangerous to even travel that way. Vampires have inhabited many of those regions in the time since the light of the elves and the dwarves sank away. I have read of them. Vampires never got along with anyone. They are a small part of a large world full of problems that are beyond two simple dwarves, I say to him with a smile. Get some sleep, Slatnikor. As the boy drifts to sleep, I stare at the sea and the lightning flashing above it. It is then I see a lone, mysterious shadow on the hill. I move my hand to my hammer and stare. With another flash in the heavens, it is gone. I know I will not sleep tonight. Something or someone is hunting us. Though I kept a long watch, the shadow did not return. With the fast approach of dawn, I awake my traveling companion and give him a piece of cured meat. Come now, we must get going, I tell him. Exiting the hut, I do a quick scan of our surroundings and see no one else around. I then take a wider view of the lands around us and notice a massive plume of smoke in the distance. Haradar is under attack again. As Slatnikor goes to stare, I choose to walk back down to the water. He follows, saying nothing about the smoke. He knows. There is no need to bring it up. If he has a question, he will ask. But at this moment, my only question is, where were we to go without a boat? I check my map and assume where we are is the northernmost tip of the lands just to the northeast of Srun. This way, I tell Slatnikor. I'm not sure where we are going, but south from here will be our best choice. We need to keep moving. We take a pathway leading down into green grasslands where rabbits run as we approach and rocky terrain sprawls out before us. There are no roads here and no other ruins. At the moment, we do not see any water save the ocean itself, and I am thankful we did bring our own supply. As the sun creeps higher, the wind dies down, and we eventually find a road leading away from the mountains of the east. As we begin to follow it, we garb ourselves and pray we do not run into anyone. I had planned to avoid roads, but I also had planned for a lot of things that had not happened thus far. Before too long, the unavoidable happened, and a man with a donkey and a cart entered the roadway ahead of us with a load of sheared wool on his cart. He stops his horse and chews on his pipe as he looks us up and down. Dwarves, far from any dwarven hold and not in chains, so I suspect you do not want to be seen. I step forward. I am Nurokas, Hammersong of Harodar. My friend and I are trying to avoid any unnecessary trouble. If you can forget we were seen, I would be thankful. The man takes a drag from his pipe. Well, I can't forget on purpose. I forget enough without trying. But I'd like to help if I can. Those legionnaires took all of my dairy cows a few days ago. Something about glory of the Protectorate, or some other hogwash crap. I'll help you if you'll let me. I'm headed to a trading town a few hours away, a little place along the way to Locum. We are going just near... Slatnikor begins. I push my hand toward his chest. That is well. We will go with you, I say to the man. No words of our travels, I whisper to Slatnikor. As the man moves some of his wool, I help Slatnikor get in and cover up. I climb up to the seat with the old man. He is still smoking his pipe and picks up the reins as he smiles. Strange seeing your type here. I had thought the dwarves were hiding in their mountains. I don't blame them. The legions moved through last night. I've never seen so many men. More reinforcements? Of course. They came through here some time ago before they took my cows to alert me that I was in grave danger if someone of magic came near. I've been around dwarves and magic folks my entire life, and I've never had an issue. This is all bollocks. I can't seem to figure out where it all went wrong. Men did not always feel as so many do now. If you repeat something to someone over and over, they eventually believe it. But there is a sickness. The man seemed to look at me, and then back to the road. Not many dwarves have it, but I have heard the elves are hit the hardest. I shake my head. Something about them makes them more susceptible to the toxin or curse, at least I think. Their greater affinity for magic, maybe. Do you think it caused by magic, as men say? I believe it to be something they found. I cannot believe a man so simple in mind could come up with this. They must have someone to push them down this path. The man took his pipe to hand and then spat. Well, I'm okay with remaining simple, but it is getting harder to do without relying on the Grand Protectorate. They put their boots in everything. Locom is damn near theirs completely. There hasn't been a king in Locom for many years, I say to him. Locom was nothing for them to capture. They have very little left to fight among men. The island folks are giving them hell, but no one can beat them. I have heard the island nation was not on the best of terms with the Grand Protectorate. No, not at all. We continue down the road in the rickety cart. I look back to Slatnikor and notice he is staring through a slot from under the wool. Are you okay? It smells. The old man laughs. I bet. They'd been lying in that field for over a day before I got a chance to pick them up. Quite a few had begun to rot. It gets hard when you get to be my age. But what am I talking about? You're dwarves. 66 is nothing for y'all. The road begins to turn to dirt, and we now ride with green fields to either side of us. There is a village ahead. Several large buildings surround an altar to Etha. I see the elven goddess, her hand held aloft to the sun. You openly worship Etha here? No, what do you speak of? The man winks at me as we draw closer to the town. I notice that there aren't any guards, at least that I see, and while a few people have swords, no one seems to even stare at the old man and his dwarven companion. As we roll through the town, we come to a fountain just before the altar to Etha. We exit, and I attempt to pay the old man for his trouble. Do not worry about it, dwarf, he says with a whisper. You have enough trouble without having to worry about paying me. If you want, just help me unload my wares onto this here mat, and we will be good. The old man lays down a sackcloth on the ground just beside the fountain. I pull off several armfuls of wool and lay them out. Slatnikor sits up and begins to do the same. As we finish our task, the old man shakes my hand over exuberantly. You may worry about men in many places, but here, us farmers run this town. You are safe to stay for a time if you need to. We have helped many dwarves and elves stay hidden, even in the beginning, before the war. Head to the tavern. They will help you. I shake the man's hand back and scan around us. I see the tavern a bit down the road and away from the main trading area. We will see if we can find someone with horses to sell or some other way to go further west. Slatnikor runs ahead of me slightly and gets to the door. It is locked, but a sketched arrow above the door directs us to a side door just down a small alley. There was a single door with a few steps and a beggar sleeping. As we pass it, I notice the beggar is not moving. I look closer and see the crystal in the beggar's eyes. The beggar moves his head, and I realize that it is no human who lies here. A dwarven guardian statue, I say to Slatnikor. Here? In this town? Yes, a strange thing. I push open the door and am met by a sweet smell. Warm mead is in the air. I walk in and Slatnikor shuts the door behind us. I immediately question where I am standing, for every part of this tavern implies that it is not a tavern of simply men. There are anvils, smelting pots, and a forge. A large bar goes through the center of the room, but it is not a bustling scene as I might have expected. There are a few men sitting at one end and a short man. No, a dwarf. Here! I go up to the bar and the dwarf looks me up and down. A Hammersong? His face goes sallow. I am not meaning to have any trouble. I know what this looks like. I do not know what you are talking of, friend. So you're not here for the bounty? Since when do Hammersongs seek bounties? The dwarf nods slowly. I see your point. Well, I am Uluu dwarf and keeper of fine treasures. Treasures or a forge? Asks Slatnikor. A bit of both, dear dwarf. We take a seat at the bar stools. The men on the far end immediately stand up and flip coins to Uluu. Thank you, gentlemen. Happy hunting. The men depart, and the nervous dwarf shoves the coins into his pocket. Hunters? Yes, but of animals, not bounties. What did you do? I ask. Nothing much. He pauses. I stole back a statue from a traveling merchant. Oh, the one outside your door? Yes, well, how did you know? Dwarf guardian statues are normally near holy places and dwarven cities like Haradar, not outside of a tavern in a small town. Uluu takes out 2 glasses and goes to the fire where the cauldron of mead is hanging. He pours the glasses full and then brings them back. I know, but the times were getting dangerous. Most people think we're closed. Others, the ones that snoop, get devoured by my statue. I can choose to release them, but during trading days, I always expect that trader to come back. He lives in Haradar, but still, if he came here once, he can come again. Not likely, I say to him. Oh, the Legion then? They have taken the Dwarven city? It holds on for now. Time is short, though. The dwarf becomes sad. I had feared that too. It is why they allow me to stay here, the farmers. They have always worked well with those of magic. We would never hurt any that came here. Places like this are rare. They are. Uluu turns towards Slatnikor. You're young. With this Hammersong here, you might just outlive us all. I hope we all can live. Uluu grins. Oh, how innocent, the youngest of the Dwarven race. I still have some bread and a block of cheese that weren't eaten by the last group that came through. Let me get that for us. He retrieves the food items, and we eat. I decide to lie down for a bit to rest, trusting in Slatnikor to watch the door, and for Uluu to do the same. I fall asleep and dream of the smell of pork over open fire pits. It is a simple memory and dream altogether. There was a time once when I did not train as a Hammersong, when I simply worked the forge and created. A simpler time, an easier life. My dream is over. I awaken to an empty room. I sit up and draw my small axe, moving through the room. Slatnikor! I make my way to the door and look out. I look right and see nothing, and I look left to also see. I blink my eyes. I see it again. The shadow, the figure, the one from before at the ruined tower by the sea. Oh, what are you doing? I hear behind me. I jump, sending Uluu stammering back. Slatnikor is behind him with his eyes wide. In his hands is a book. I thought that... I notice how foolish I look, my heavy breathing, my axe out. I look out again. The shadow figure is gone, or perhaps it was my own mind. I shut the door and exhale before sliding my axe back in its place. I woke up to find myself alone. Sorry, master, Slatnikor says to me as he closes his book. I was enjoying a book of history, a bit like mine from home, but it talked more of the snow dwarves. There is not much known of our cousins, I say. Oh, there is much to know, though, Uluu said. I was married to one, a long time ago. You could say things between us went a bit cold, too. There is a sudden knock at the door. It is forceful and deliberate. "I have capped the candle in the window. All know that when it is out, I am closed. I wanted to keep you two safe." There is another knock. "Ulu, open the door!" a panicky voice yells. He goes to the door to find a random man out of breath. "They are coming!" "Who? Foul men?" "No, the storms the fortune-teller spoke of last spring, the gypsy songs, the fires from the heavens." Ulu suddenly looked as if he had seen a ghost, as pale as I have ever seen a dwarf, second to one who was dead. "This cannot be!" "What?" I run to the door and notice how bright it is. I begin down the alley back down the road and notice Slatnikor following me. I grasp my hammer. It hums as I move it through the air. I hear screaming. I spot people running in a panic looking up. There is a deep glow and a searing sound. I look up to see red lightning. As I enter the village street, I see nothing but panic. I turn to look behind me and see a twisting whirlwind of fire dropping down from black clouds just over the edge of the village. I look further up and see something beyond belief to even a dwarf of my age. It is a god, the god of war, the god who is a brother to the patron god of dwarves called Throka. This is Kel, and he is angry. I had heard that the war god was upon the lands in the many months before. Now I can confirm that he isn't captured. He isn't dead. He is here. Now. I have read of his demons, faithful to him alone, sent into the world to cause havoc and destruction. He has a zeal against men. He does not care about their alliance, their faith, or anything else. He is angry and does not forgive. The belief is that he does it to protect those of magic, but I cannot be sure, and his hellfire is turning the air hot. Slatnikor is still in the doorway, and the fearful eyes of the other dwarf stare out. I push my way back in and shut the door. "What is it, master?" "Kel is upon us. He will destroy this village. His fire rains down. Do you have somewhere we can hide or escape the city?" Smoke begins to roll in the rafters above us. Ulo shakes his head. "There is no way out, but if we go down, yes, down into the basement, there is a place, a dwarven sanctuary. It was built on this ground well before it was used by men. We can go there." The dwarf leads us to a back room, past where I guessed that he and Slatnikor had been reading, and to a stairwell that was dark and covered in dust. "I do not care for the dark," he says. "A dwarf who does not care for dark?" Slatnikor asks. "I told you I was with a snow dwarf. They live in the snow and have the polar lights to light their nights. Plus, well, I've never really cared for mining or fighting." "So you're not a very good dwarf?" We reach an open room filled with wreckage. There is a single stone in the center of the room, only obvious once Ulu finishes moving a bunch of crates from it. He rubs the top, and a crystal appears. With a twist, a small door opens in the wall. "A good enough dwarf to save you," he says to Slatnikor. Back the way we came, the glow and crackle of burning wood shines down the stairs. I look into the darkness, seeing nothing but stone. Slatnikor moves into the structure, and the glowing stones, sensing his dwarven blood, come to life, revealing dwarven runes. Behind me, I hear a sudden snarl and hiss. I turn and see that Ulu is holding a silver hammer in hand. Beyond him, standing on the stairwell, is something I have never seen. It is black like ash, with fiery wisps of armor solidified near its core. It stands on two legs, with enraging flames rising all over its body. "Hammersong, I take it this should be easy for one such as you," Ulu says. I point my hammer at the creature as Slatnikor appears behind me. "Do not come forward if I fall. Go into the room and lock yourself in." "But, master—" "Now!" The creature of fire turns its head, and seems to laugh, sounding both like one who is mortal such as us, but also like a searing flame moving through the air. It lunges our way, sending a blade of fire into the wall behind. I bring my hammer around in a swipe, striking the beast and casting embers all over the basement. The fires are growing above us, and sweat pours down my brow. The creature jumps into the air and spins, sending spikes of rock at both Ulu and myself. The creature strikes my gauntlet. A searing flame takes to my armor. Ulu grabs at the beast, and another blast of fire lights up the room. I pull the burning substance left from its attack out of my damaged armor. The place where it was is melted, but thankfully it didn't burn through to my flesh. I look to my fellow dwarf to see him on the ground and covered in scorch marks. The creature stabs its blade into Ulu and then looks my way. I am a Hammersong of Haradar, beast of Kel. You cannot defeat me no matter your master's will or with the magic of all that is foul. It lunges at me with its fiery blade again, and I parry it down with my hammer before I grip the blade with one hand. My dragon skin gloves can withstand these flames, though I still feel the searing heat. I use this hold to ball a fist and strike the creature in the face. It recoils, and I bring my hammer up with both hands, knocking it further back. Its fire has darkened some. It is gasping. I grip my hammer and, singing, it hums through the air, smashing into the weakened form, sending sparks across the floor as if a hammer striking hot metal. The creature darkens fully, and I step back from my victory. The fires above begin to drop more debris into the basement. I move into the room with Slatnikor, and once inside, we pull a lever to seal the room. We are safe. I sit, placing my hammer at my side, and bury my face in my hands as Slatnikor looks on. You were brave, I say, but it is not time. Your fate could have been the same as our host had you helped. The heat from the firestorm above is obvious, but in a bit of time it reduces, and then it is gone. I walk up to the door of the chamber and place my hand on the stone. It is warm. We should not leave, not yet. As we both sit in the room, I notice that it is literally just a room. No trinkets, no other doors, just a stone room with Dwarven writing across the ceiling. I read it. It is an old dialect. It talks of a sea monster breathing an icy fire. Was it a dragon? Asks Slatnikor. Something like it. This must have been a hideout for when it attacked, I tell him. It is some time later. Slatnikor has drifted off to sleep. I go to the doorway again, and it feels cool. Come on, I shout. Slatnikor joins me at the doorway, and we both are prepared for what may be on the other side. I worry that it may be more of those fire beasts, whatever they are. But opening the door, we find nothing but ashes. I look up to see a red and black sky with smoke rising up. Now even the body of our fellow dwarf friend remains. As we walk up the hill of ash now before us, we see nothing of the old village. Every structure, every person, and even the stones are melted into the ground. The icy wind of the ocean blows upon us. Why would a god do this? Slatnikor asks. A god does what he or she can in a world that has lost faith. Few believe as you and me. Few believe there is hope. The gods must protect themselves or, in this case, give judgment as they seem fit. Why not attack the legions? Why not attack their cities? I have no answer for you, I tell him. There are more than just the gods of the north whom we revere. The gods of the south, those known as the Itsu, are rumored to be gathering power. It is they he perhaps fears. I look around, spotting several horses on the far edge of what was once the town. They must have escaped, or perhaps were allowed to live. We will go there. Leading Slatnikor, I scan around and spot the figure again. I hold my hand out, stopping Slatnikor. This time he sees him. What are you? I shout. It moves toward us. It is a man or a woman, not a dwarf, and I don't think it an elf. Master Dwarf? It says with a deep voice, "You are well known as a wanted thing, do you know?" "I'm not worth the bounty, I assure you." I hold my hammer out. The figure draws his blade. "I do not need the money, only the pleasure of killing you. You are sick, dear dwarf. You and your little tunnel rat too. I have treatment. I have the cure." The figure runs forward, leaping into the air above us. Slatnikor and I both move to either side, and the man twists his attacks, moving against Slatnikor first. I swing, sending a shockwave of dwarf magic from my hammer into the air. It vibrates, catching the attacker by surprise. The attacker's hood falls, and I see it is a man. He brings his blades down on my hammer, pushing against me before rolling over the top. He stabs, catching the edge of my armor just as Slatnikor swipes his axe, clipping the man's shoulder. The man is distracted again. I rush him, driving my shoulder into his chest before pushing him to the ground. I drop my hammer, drawing a knife to stab the man when he rolls away, jumping up before moving with haste backwards. "Foolish dwarf, you will see what the wisdom of men already knows. You will not escape this, and I will be watching as your folly is realized. You and your kind will never escape, for we of men are wise, and the order of men does not sleep." The man flees from us, doing exactly what I expect from a simple man. "We must follow him," Slatnikor says to me. "No, we must not be distracted. He may come back or he may not. It does not matter, for we must be watchful of all and always prepared. You did fine work landing a strike on him," I say to the out-of-breath dwarf. We leave the village, walking toward the horses and mounting the two smaller steeds. I look at my map and gather a western trek will take us near Locum. It is strange to me that that man spoke of something called the Order of Men. I have heard that name before, but in all our searching we dwarves have failed to discover their identity, or if such an order even truly exists. Part 3. Bloodshed. The horses are helping to speed along our journey. Though the night is well upon us now, I rub where my gauntlet had been, and the burn mark from the fire creature's attack. I cannot believe I faced such an entity. I still have trouble believing I managed to kill it too. Blessed be the dwarf Ulu. He may have been fearful of the dark, but he was a dwarf still, and he charged forward when taken by fear. The road is long and straight, with hills that take us up and then back down. Slatnikor looks half asleep. I've known children to sleep, but I swear he sleeps more than a mountain bear in winter. At least his horse is still doing a decent job. There is no one else on the road at this hour, and I am thankful of that. Some time ago we passed the way up to Srun. The road was taking us back south to some degree. In time, it turned back due west, and I knew we would be upon Locum by morning. I'm not sure of our exact path, but following this path is dangerous. Locum is of men, but if we can get past there and to Taria, there are tunnels to take us deep into the mountains and relative safety for the rest of our journey. We just need to get there. As the sun comes up, I can see a deep fog on the city ahead. Locum is massive, but I immediately see that we cannot go forward. I can see Legion banners in the fields. Though I knew it to be a large expanse and not as easy as taking the main road, we have spent too much time on clear paths. Slatnikor spurs his horse with me, and we ride south, coming to an expanse of ground and a sheer cliff. I dismount and walk to the edge. Slatnikor stands with me and stares to the city. "It is so large," he says. "Built by men of different blood and heart than these," I say to him. "Listen, there is a different road we must take. We could go far south and come back up through the woods, but I feel we may risk too much in general." The cliffs below us are precarious, but I can make out a path. "We will go past this city by taking this way." I point. Some dwarf roads are not as obvious, but we will pass beneath the city itself where no man will expect us. It is the safest path. I do not know for sure if this is best, but I cannot see another way. I smack both of our horses, sending them away, and then work my footing down the cliff face. As the sun begins to turn the lands again to light, we disappear over the side. The path is here, but my clunky armor makes it difficult. Dwarves can climb, and our roads are normally in precarious places, but there is no real road here. I see a flatter area coming up. That, I hope, is an actual roadway. This cliffside was carved by giants, or so the stories go. I would rather us not run into any giants at the moment. We reach the lower level, and I am right. It is a road, still dangerous but without any actual climbing. Both Slatnikor and I are out of breath, and my arms are actually burning with tiredness. Ahead, still a good distance away, I see the falls coming down from the city itself. I pause for a moment and point out the river as it falls down the hill and further out. From here, I can almost spot the Gulf of Alrina. These are grand lands, I tell Slatnikor, but it will be a time before I feel they are safe for our kind. I trace my sight from the distance back up the rocky face of the cliff, and I see something unexpected. There are bodies here. I don't notice any around us, but down, further into the rocky crevices below, are headless bodies. A voice shouts out, "With the light of the sun, let more blood run!" The sunlight has just pierced over the cliffs, but we are still in the shadows. I look up to where the voice had come from and see something rolling down toward us. "Back!" I say to Slatnikor. We cling to the cliff as a body lands on the edge of the road just before us. The top of the body is slowly rolling off the cliff, but from the glimpse I see it is not a dwarf, but from the skin and jewelry, I recognize it is an elf. The body rolls off the road and continues falling. A moment later, something else comes. Like a rock rolling down the cliff, leaving a bloody path, comes the head of the victim. The head lands just near where the body did. It is as if the elf is staring at us, her blue eyes without life. I step forward and look up. I hear a horn sound and screams. I tuck back against the cliff wall and close my eyes as blood runs down the rock and bodies fall in an avalanche of death. So many of them, and not just elves. I see dwarves as well. I close my eyes and grip Slatnikor. He sees the blood of the real world, and I pity him. As the blood runs down us both, still hot from those killed above and their bodies dumped below, I embrace him. Such is as we have come to expect of men. I had heard rumors of this to the far south, a place called Fadabrin. But to see the horrors upon our people, I hope you understand why you must survive. Why we must survive. This evil cannot continue. He nods his head, though a tear runs down his face through the blood of those of magic. My father spoke of something that will secure our peoples, but he would not say what. I do not know, but in time, one day, perhaps it will be revealed to both of us. The bloodshed has stopped. I look up the cliffs and listen, but I do not hear or see anything. Let us go, I say. We reach the falls beneath the city and do what we can to rid ourselves of our blood. There is a small pool that comes off an area that leads into a cave system. I rub the dry blood off my skin, watching the sanguine river flow from me. The smell, though normally one that drives my battle lust, repulses me. Slatnikor seems eager, but strangely, he looks around almost with anxiety. What is it? Fear, he says. Fear? In all my training we have talked of battle and brotherhood, but what about fear? I have never seen you in fear. Do you ever fear of anything? I smile, and I do not do it to make light of what he says, but I touch him on the shoulder. Of course I fear. I have fears for our people, for our future, for many things beyond understanding. I fear Andgrast, the devourer of dwarves, a terrible beast that in truth I have had nightmares of, for it has killed more Hammersongs than I care to mention. It has an appetite for us. I see it devouring me. It came close once. A few weeks ago, at the turn of midnight, it dropped down upon the highest reaches of Haradar. Though we fought it off, it has such a ravenous hunger for those of dwarven blood. His face turns white, and his breathing is shallow. I have told you that us Hammersongs are not immortal. We are not gods. I know, but I embrace the stories. I remember those. And I, young one, embrace the memory of the real ones. You must keep that in mind, too. As for that beast Andgrast, I will one day defeat him, I promise you. You can have fear, but it is how you embrace it. Wear it upon you as a zeal to prevent it, but also know that our paths are set upon firm stone. What is upon us now is what we make of it. They were killing those elves, killing them because they were elves. I nod. And we did the same, and so did the elves to us, in the wars ages ago. Time is like a circle. What has happened before will happen again. Only the circumstances in that time will appear different, and those living in the present will rarely see the similarity. So men have come against those of magic like this before? I take a deep breath. In a way, a time ago, yes. But the Itsu were behind it then. The southern gods inspired rebellion. But then, it was the great races like us, elves, and the now vanished race called Dwemhar who fought them. Back then, they were like our children who had gone astray. Oh, how astray they are now. I look deeper into the cave. There are random spots of light shining down, but a fairly clear path is ahead. Let us go this way, I say. We begin to walk. The ground is slick with the mists from the river falling down the rocks as our path leads us to a rocky pillar and an old bridge crossing a chasm of darkness. Dwarf tunnels from many 100 years ago, I tell him. The path goes west and we follow it. The cave itself becomes more earthen and I feel the air changing. The mustiness and damp environment changes to that of a drier cold. Ahead of us, I spot light coming through some larger rocks. Reaching the stone wall, I push away some of the rocks and reveal a small opening leading to the outside. I emerge from the cave and notice that we are now past Locum and in a wooded area to the east of the city. Slatnikor climbs out, and I push rocks against the opening and kick dirt back over some of the cracks to make it look less like anyone had actually moved them. The woods to the west of the city are massive, as are the mountains rising up and reaching toward the north. The Great Tychen Mountains, I tell him. Some of the richest ores found were in the deep veins of these peaks. There are still treasures lost to time sealed away in old dwarven holds. Perhaps one day we will reclaim the old places of our people. Slatnikor smiles. It seems to me the fear he spoke of is fleeing his mind. We are closer to the end of our journey. Once we get to the caves, we will be safe. We begin walking through the woods. There is a road to the north that leads us directly where we need to go, but considering our time on roads before in this journey, I feel it better to take the less followed path. The woods and dales in this region go on for some time, and there is significantly less chance of a run-in with trouble going this way. We walk until the sun is well over midday. A small river has broken off from an unseen spring in a patch of dark rocks, and it is here we decide to take a drink and a bite of meat. "Birds!" Slatnikor says. A blue bird flaps down on a rock near us, and then a yellow one joins it. He reaches into a bag and pulls out a few rock seeds, tossing them to the birds. "Really? You bring seeds and you do not tell me?" I tease him. "Oh, here, master, have some." I take a few and give him a smile so he knows I was kidding. Mountain seeds are rare this time of year, and I actually consider them one of my favorite treats. There is a sudden shuffle to our right, and then I hear a thud. Someone is crying. I stand up, at first alarmed, looking around, but then I see a small child with a red face wet with tears. I hurry over to him. He recoils, terrified. "I'm not going to hurt you," I say to him. He's breathing fast and his leg appears injured. I notice broken limbs around him. Perhaps he was looking at us from a nearby tree and lost his footing. He is maybe 8 years old by his general size. I'm not surprised he was watching us, but I am surprised of his stark fear. "You're okay, son. I will help you get home. Just tell me where to take you." "Are you sure we should?" asks Slatnikor. "I mean, we should, but that will take us close to others who may not treat us in the best of ways." "You are right," I tell him, "but if we can show kindness to one, perhaps our passage on will be easier. This child has not wandered too far from home. I would rather a temporary peace to get us through unhindered than to end up in a bloodbath." The boy tries to get out of my arms, and I hold him tightly. He then bites me. "Listen, I'm not going to hurt you." I set him on the ground, and he tries to get away. "You're a dwarf! You want to kill me!" he yells. "I do not! I want to help you get home!" The boy tries to crawl away, but cannot. I place my hand on his shoulder, and he stares at me. "I will take you home and leave you be. Dwarves are not as you see us, and I cannot leave you in the woods." The boy's breathing seems to slow. "You're not sick, not like they have been telling us?" "Sick?" asks Slatnikor. I answer, "No, we are not as you have been told." I lift him back off the ground. "Now, which way to your home?" He points to the north. "Not too far that way. We have a cabin lodge in the woods, mainly for the hunters who come through." We begin to walk. The path quickly becomes evident from a well-trodden road that leads up to the top of a hill. Though I see recent hoof marks, and I am wary of horsemen from Locum, the marks show they were traveling the other way. As we come to a clearing, I notice a large log house with a massive porch and a large fireplace on the right side. There are animal hides hanging on racks along the porch and a freshly cleaned deer lying out on a table. As we reach the porch, a woman runs out and stops a few paces from me and just stares. "Good day. Your son was injured in the woods. We wanted to help him home." I smile, and she looks down at his injury. "Did this dwarf do this to you?" The boy looks back at me and then to his mother. "No, I was in a tree and I fell." 2 men emerge from the house with a bucket and a knife. They were going to go finish with the deer, but upon seeing us, they approach. The one without a knife draws a sword. "What are they doing here?" he asks the woman. "Our son was out climbing and fell. They helped him." I stare the man down as he approaches with his sword still out. My hand is a few inches from my small axe, and I see Slatnikor shuffle in the corner of my vision. The man plants the blade of the sword in the ground and reaches out his hand. I shake it. "Thank you, dwarf. Thank you, both of you. Why don't you come in and have a cup of tea?" I shake my head. "We are well. We only wanted to see the boy home safe." "No, I insist. Come in. I am sure the wilds of Taria can wait. We don't see many dwarves this way. I'd be honored." With a mild amount of protest, I agree to take the man's offer. He takes his sword and sheathes it as he leads us into a large open house with a massive table. There are stag horns and mounted heads of goats, bears, and moose all along the walls. Opposite of the table, which is just inside the house, is a massive window that looks out and down the hills into the woods. As we sit at the table, the child's parents steep our tea as the other man present tends to the boy's arm. After he wraps it, he abruptly stands and speaks to the boy's father. "I need to go get some of my things. Shouldn't be long." He then looks at me. "Thank you, dwarf. You have definitely helped us this day." The man departs as the woman pours our tea. "So where are you headed?" she asks. "Hunting ducks," I say. "Ducks?" the man asks. "You're too far north for them. There are some good waterways and a lake further south, but the hills here aren't too good for that." I smell the tea and then look at Slatnikor as he lifts his. I smell something off. He looks at me and I shake my head slightly. He sits his mug back down. Is something wrong? The woman says with a smile. No, I just feel we shouldn't take too much of our time. My partner and I have a good deal more ground to cover, and seeing that the boy is in good hands, I think we will depart. Thank you. I stand, as does Slatnikor. The boy's father stands as well. I insist you wait. I can see what is happening. I see his hand go to his hilt. I should have listened to Slatnikor. This was a foolish move of my own doing. The door is just a few feet away. Come, Slatnikor, I say. We begin to the door, and the woman gets between us and the door. She is holding a dagger. We need you to stay. There is quite a bounty on dwarves. I think you will find it better to just wait. Slatnikor unslings his axe as I put my hand on my hammer. The boy's father circles around to stand by his wife. We do thank you for helping our child. His arm will heal, but now he and his parents will have plenty of gold. It is a needed convenience for us. The Grand Protectorate only wishes to help those like you. They take you to Locum and will heal you upon the cliffs. It is a morning ritual, a lovely ritual. I want you to see help from your sickness. I hear approaching horses, several of them. You will let us out now, I say. They both step forward a single step. Their weapons are out. I look to Slatnikor and motion for him to stand behind me. Do not try anything, dwarf. I have fought many dwarves. I was in the Imperial Guard. You have not the room for your tricky movements here. Just release your hammer, and it will be fine. I smile. I will do what you ask, and it will be. Do not tell me to part from my hammer. I grip my hammer with both hands, releasing it as the man requested in an arching crack directly on the floor of the house, sending a shockwave that throws off both of the humans and shatters part of the wall. This way, Slatnikor! We run outside to see several legionnaires and the man from before who had left. I told you we had two! I told you! He shouts. One of the legionnaires steps forward as I make a direct path toward them. By order of the Grand Protectorate, throw down your weapons and come with us. You are not allowed to be here, and you are ill. We will care for you. The hell with you, milk drinker! I burst into a sprint, slamming my hammer into his head, sending blood and brain to one side. I crash into the line of men, spinning and bringing my hammer into their chests, throwing most of them back. A spear thrusts for my chest, and another attempts to pin down my hammer, but it sings in the wind, bringing another smiting strike against two more of them. Slatnikor runs forward, swinging his axe and cutting down one of them, but falling short of giving the killing blow. The boy's parents are now outside, and I feel a prick in my side. A spear point withdraws from my back, but it is only a graze in a softer spot of my armor. The wielder of the spear recoils back as I smash my hammer into his torso, breaking his guarding hands and throwing the man down. They grab onto my hands and push me down. I smack them with the back of my gauntlets, abandoning my hammer for two axes and turning their armor to cracked metal as I hack the layers in two and cleave their heads. There is only one more along with the man from before. The man runs at me, and I parry his spear, burying my axe into his face. The remaining legionnaire runs for his horse, jumping on as quickly as he can. He spurs his horse to run, attempting to flee, but he does not expect the sudden impact of the skull of one of his companions against his own head. The man collapses and falls off his fleeing horse. I turn to see the mother and father. We will not let you live. We will call for more guards. Your kind will die. You cannot continue to infect our world. They begin to circle me. I do not want to hurt you two, I say. Go inside. Go to your son. The boy they helped earlier emerges from the door. Go back in, his father shouts. Go in. You've been around them too much. We do not want to risk more than we already have. He may have the sickness and not know it. You bastard man, it only affects those of magic anyway. You don't know that. he says to me. He motions for his wife to go around to my side, and Slatnikor points his axe at her as we begin to rotate as they encircle us. I do not want to hurt you, I say again. I will stop you, dwarf! I will! He runs at me, and I parry his sword before cracking his ribs with my axe. Blood sprays out the side of his chest, and I hear Slatnikor shout. The woman has pushed him down and is about to stab him when I hurl my axe, taking off her head. I run to him. Why did you hesitate? She is his mother. He points to the boy on the porch. I look behind us and see the boy running to his fallen parents. You cannot hesitate, I tell him. They won't hesitate to kill you. If you want to live, you will fight. The boy begins to scream, collapsed between his parents. I drop my axes in their loops and pick up my hammer. We can do nothing else, I tell Slatnikor. We will head south, away from the road again. There might be more guards. What of him? Slatnikor says, pointing. The boy screams at them. His mind has been made of us. This did not help. We cannot help him. I begin to walk, hating myself for what has happened. I can hear the boy wailing, and though I try to see some good in all, I hate what they did to us, what they forced us to do. I feel bad that the child has been made to suffer as this. We journey south for a while. Though we are far from the actual hunting lodge where the day's earlier events had transpired, I can still hear the boys screaming. I am sure Slatnikor can too, but I have no comfort to give him. He learns now what this world has truly become for those like us, those of magic. As the sun begins to set, I lead Slatnikor to a place in the woods where we can rest. The night sky blesses us with a darker moon and bright stars. I am about to drift off myself, feeling secure against the rocks of the Tychen Mountains, when shrill sounds take the air. I look up and see shadows moving in the sky. I grab Slatnikor and cover him. Master, what is it? Dread beasts, like the one called Andgrast. We must be still. We must hope they just pass over. I watch them, their smoky forms gliding over the trees and the valley. I hear their wings flapping as they search for prey, for unsuspecting elves or dwarves caught in the open. We are secure in our spot, or so I believe for now. As they move over us and further south, I exhale and release my tight grip on Slatnikor. I will not sleep this night. The morning sun comes, and though I had a few moments where my eyes closed, the dread beasts did not return, and we were fortunate. I look from our path with the morning sun and see another stretch of woods. We will journey that way and begin to make our way north. If we can keep our path true, it will take us less than another day to get to the area near the waters of the Great Bay of the North and the old Dwarven passages. As we move through the trees, I think of our journey thus far and the many turns of it. I had seen more than I had expected, and in some ways I feel like Slatnikor is growing to understand better what it is we face. All things have happened for a reason thus far. Though we have taken an indirect path to our goals, I know we will make it. I see something ahead. I kneel down, and Slatnikor does the same. I'm surprised they have not seen us yet. Elves, I whisper to him. Ahead of us, I can see a small group of elves, very small. I can only believe that this has something to do with our troubles thus far. Elves this far west is about as rare as dwarves this far west. I have gotten Slatnikor this far by myself, but some fate has put us meeting these elves. They do not see us yet. I had always heard not to trust elves, Slatnikor says. That is how it was before now, but as I told you back when we left Haradar, much has changed. We will see why these elves are so far from Narisond. You will see that all is as fate decrees it. I have gotten Slatnikor to Taria. I feel a stirring in my chest that these elves are important to us. My master said to be watchful. Now we will see. Arrowfall is told from the elves of Narisond, and the conclusion to the Dwarven Guardian. She is dead, my father whispered. I wept, my hand on her chest, rubbing across her woven dress to the cruel dwarven bolts stuck into her body. I tried to lift up her bloodied hand, but she was already stiff with death. Dwarves? Why would they do this to us? The dwarves did not do this. We are meant to think they did. The dwarves flee for their lives just as we do. I looked up over the grasslands, the bodies of elves lying out, pecked by birds, with the embers of campfires still smoldering around them. This elf must have died first. The others were likely tortured for a time before finally murdered, as if it were a game. Some were missing fingers, and others had carvings made into their faces. The wind blew off the distant sea, kicking up the ash, and I wiped a tear from my eye. Why were they out in the open like this? They know we are hunted. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. They were trying to get home. Our city is the last hope for many, and what we do now to try to save the others, most do not know. We cannot change that. Rissar stood with his bow to the left of us. His attention perked up, and he drew an arrow. Legion horsemen! 3 armored men thundered toward us on black horses. These were scouts, roving hunters meant to chase down small groups of elves, dwarves, and any other who stood against them. I pulled back on my bowstring, as did my father, and in unison fired. 3 more were dead. 3 more who would never look upon their loved ones again. Good. They didn't deserve to. None of the race of men did. We fled the only home I ever knew, leaving it in a state of turmoil and war. Narasond was the place of my people and the grandest of elven cities. It had burning torches that stood high on the mountaintops, with fires so great they looked like giant moons in the night sky. All who gazed upon them knew that the lands beneath their glow belonged to us, and our realm in the trees between the arms of the mountain rivers remained safe. But that safety had faded. It was now just before the twilight hour. Taking a separate path away from the main roads, I had hoped that others of my people could escape too, but we were a small group and meant to move fast. My father's skill with potion-making was needed where we went, and it was decided by the elven tribunals that we would make haste, rather than go with the others departing soon afterward. I traveled with him, as well as 2 other elves. My father believed this was best for us, but I worried of my other kin. Just like the elves found in the fields earlier in the day, my race was under constant attack. From the far southeast, we journeyed north into a realm of men called Taria. I loved the mountains and woods. They reminded me of home just as my father said they would. My thoughts of home wouldn't leave my mind. "What is wrong, child?" he said to me at last, looking to the path ahead. His glance was stern. "I'm thinking of home, and I am tired." So are those behind us. Their fingers pull their bowstrings unceasingly as we flee. Think of them and find strength. You must stay strong now. My back tinged at the frigid droplets falling from dark clouds above. The rains had flooded the path once we turned north and passed into the foothills. The way became increasingly steep, but I deliberated over my father's words. Our homeland guardians had been in a constant battle to protect our woodlands. In the last few days, even dwarves had joined our ranks. I had always heard they were the enemy of old. Lazy drunkards, without care for trees and flowers, but only the growth of beards and coin purse. I was happy to have not dealt with them in person. The lives of elves were beyond that of the tunnel-dwelling dwarves, but now I was told we must work together. I trusted the elves with us. Rysaiah was one of the best archers from our realm, and his eyes could see wind brushing the trees, the way the arrow's path would sway in the wind before it reached its target. I admired his skill. The other was Namase. He too was good with a bow, but his knife work had gained him renown in many battles in the ages before. He had been ill before this night following his journeys to the west, and he was quieter than I was used to. Nightfall came, and we began to move more cautiously. While men could not see well in the darkness, Our eyes saw clear ahead, but it was to the sky we watched as we moved into the dense underbrush. We walked with swift feet, passing through a herd of grazing deer with only the sound of a faint breeze with our footsteps. "Down!" Namasi ordered. I dropped to the ground. Risea drew back his bow, checking the branches and bluffs around us. My father set an arrow to his string and joined Namasi in a careful scan above. The boughs of the trees swayed with a great wind, and looking up, I spotted the sparkling of stars. Suddenly, against the sky, I could see a strange, shadowy creature moving and swooping closer. There were other blotches in the sky, black like ash with embers as eyes. I watched as one seemed to flap down in a circle toward us. I hugged the ground. The presence of these creatures sapped the life from the earth, killing the grasses and shrubs that fell beneath its presence. The screams of the natural life in the grass were deafening. These things were dread beasts, poisonous creatures akin to the demon beasts of the grave. The roots of a nearby tree cracked as the creature landed in the upper branches. The stench of its presence upon the woods must have been the wardreer that I learned of years ago. The elder elves spoke of death on the battlefield and the shattering of life forces. Death was in the air. I could barely breathe, and around me the grasses withered and browned. Elves could hear the quiet voices of plants, and I listened as they fell silent. My father did not release his arrow, and Risea kept his bow up only until the creature shrieked and then flapped away, joining the others flying high above. We had escaped discovery this time. The flocks of these creatures were ravenous, dropping down and killing many of our kind who were unfortunate to be away from the safety of our realm. Elves like us. I had heard rumors of one that was said to be the fiercest of the beasts. And-grassed, they called it, a forsaken word now among the halls of elves and dwarves alike. It had become a name to mean death, for too many of my kind had died under its claws. Everywhere we were searched for, by beasts and demons of the pits from the lands of the south and the nations of men alike. Though once they were our friends in trade, and some even as those of like family, they would now drag us out and point us out to any who sought us. A curse had stricken us of magic, one that, to everyone else, was our own pestilence, a sickness of the mind that drove our kind to madness and death at our own hand. I had not seen it in Narisond, but those who lived closer to men were not of such fate. There was no medicine of elvish craft that could heal them, and my father knew well of herbs and tonics. I never saw my father cry like the time he spoke the rites of passage for my grandmother. It was not of elves to die in suffering, much less to die at all. We went slower the rest of the night, keeping along the bases of the mountains. The lands did not feel as they did at home. It had been many years since the elven gardeners had tended these woods and flowers. The elves had lost much ground in past wars, and the gods of the north did little to help us anymore, too caught up with their own issues and desires to pay attention to our needs. It was the war god, Kel, we feared. He had been stricken wild and had destroyed much of the world in his desire to stop those gods of the south. I guess it could be said that he had done something by the meaning of the word, though not in preference to us, for the destruction of the natural world was not our desire. Mid-morning came, and we had not stopped. Our path turned toward an earthen road, and it was there from the roadside we spotted the gleam of an axe head. At once, I pulled my bowstring taut and looked beyond the silver point ahead. Namasi drew his knives and ran forward, stopping just before the edge of the road. "Calm, friends. We thought you ill-willed and possibly those who search for both our kinds." From the bushes emerged a burly man with a horned cowl. He was stout and held 2 axes in his hand. A gold and sapphire-encrusted hammer slung across his back gleamed in the sunlight. I knew what he was at once. Hammersong's, the Dwarven High Guard. But finding him alone was odd for 2 reasons. 1, dwarves normally traveled in larger groups, and considering his status within Dwarven society, he would likely be protecting someone of great importance. I then spotted a much less pronounced dwarf, smaller, juvenile even, following behind him, with his eyes bouncing between us elves. "We are traveling north," the Hammersong said. "I am Nurokas. This with me, Slatnikor. I was among many who fled Haradar. Few of our people remain there. A great host went south to your lands, elf. It seems our time may be growing short in the world." My father looked down at me and then to the dwarf. "You can travel with us. We head to the place crafted by your kind high in the mountains of the north. It is there we will be safe." The dwarf's beard curled around his lips, and he smoothed it out with his hand. "That is well. This young one has needed someone to talk to." Nurokaz looked toward me, and the boy dwarf looked too. I indeed did not look much older than of youth, but I had thrice the lifetimes on this boy. "Traveling with a child is dangerous," Risaya pointed out. "Are you his father?" "His father and mother both stayed in Haradar to give us time to flee. That is all that needs to be spoken of about it." The dwarf raised his brow and looked up at the sky. I knew at once that this meant the young dwarf's parents were dead. I felt a sudden sadness for him. "But he is able, trained since he was able to walk in the use of hammers and axes. He wishes to become a Hammersong when he is of age. I told him it isn't worth it." Nurokas laughed and then pulled his glove off his hand, revealing that while he had a hand, it was a mixture of flesh and crafted metal that articulated as he moved what fingers he still had. The dwarves were crafters of many items, mostly for profit to men, but they took to their sciences almost as much as we did to the spirits of nature. Our cultures had fought many times, but never had either side come close to victory. Elvish bows did little in the close confounds of underground passages, and dwarves did no better in the open meadows, where clear arrow shots could be had from the great trees of our lands. I did wonder if our ancestors wasted too much time quarreling with each other. Perhaps the answer was obvious now that we faced a mutual enemy. We continued up the path for the greater part of the day. Our pace slowed somewhat by our new company. We stopped only once more than I expected, but it was not for pity on the dwarves and their lack of stamina, but a foul smell in the air. The wind twisted around us and then changed. A nervous glance passed between my father and Risaya. They both ascended into the trees. Namase once again drew his knives, and I noticed Slatnikshore held his axe while looking around the underbrush. "Dwarf," I said, "they call you Slatnikor?" He looked to me and nodded his head. "Do you not speak?" "I speak. Dwarves must not worry about common talk, for most of it is foul and untrue." The Hammersong leaned down to him. "But common talk in uncommon times is valuable for the soul." The dwarf nodded, almost as if now he had permission to talk to me. "Yes, I am Slatnikor. I am 5th in rank of stone-level students. That means I can mine in the mid-level mines by myself. Haradar was my home for the greater part of 20 years. Of winters I have seen 32. I do know by the age of elves I am very much a child to you. For 32 years I expected a bit larger of a dwarf, but considering what little I knew of them, I could not say much. Most dwarves that I had seen on the roads were much older, stouter, and meaner. That might have been a characteristic of older dwarves, or just another misunderstanding. I did not know. My father and Risa descended from the trees. "We see no ill life in the skies or open places for some distance. We will near nightfall before we can get to the next large road," my father said. Again we were moving. We kept a hurried pace until, once again, an impromptu stop. My father's hand pushed me to the ground, and I turned my face to breathe. Slatnikor, too, was forced down. He now lay in the bushes off the road. The Hammersong with him brandished both of his axes. I scanned above in the boughs of the trees and to all sides of me. Nothing. The earth did not tremble with footsteps, nor did I hear rustling in the woods around us. I looked up into the sky and spotted that the clouds moved over us with the speed of a great storm. The winds were increasing, and a blackening sky gave way to bolts of lightning that struck the mountaintops of distant peaks. My father took a potion from his belt. "Risa Namase here." As the two elves came toward us, we joined Nurokas and Slatnikchor. Taking the potion, my father cracked the top and poured it in a circle around us. A veil lifted from the earth in a silver shimmering, forming an opaque covering for us. "Nurokas, we are safe here from the eyes of the deity." "With them abound, you could tell me the potion would turn me into a toad and I would be well with it." Namase laughed. "You cannot drink as a toad, dwarf." "A funny one here, yes. That would be an ill result, but still better than being dead." It was nice to see them both laugh. It shrouded the truth that the war god of the north had turned to such malevolent practices. There was talk he created this sickness affecting us all, but his quarry was more for men than us. Men were not harmed by this as we were. Kel did not do this. It was something or someone else. Besides, the war god had been missing for some time. I had heard a rumor that the Itsu had killed him. The Itsu was the proper name of the gods of the south. "Do you think it is Kel?" Namase asked my father. "No, I would wish of such, but I do fear the war god has faltered. Wura remains, but he is not as overt as his brother." The clouds above began to return to normal as the billowed shapes torn asunder by sweeping winds left only fragments of gray in a path toward the south. The tops of the mountains smoldered from the lightning strikes with black smoke twisting into the skies. We continued into the night and shared meat with the dwarves. I had never really eaten meat due to the beliefs of my people, but the events of late guided new thoughts on old beliefs. The taste was strange, and it reminded me of sea air. A drink of tea would be nice. I understood it was the salt that they used to preserve it, so that it could provide subsidence later. It was food, and of that I could not complain. In the darkness of night, I could see growing clouds with periodic flashes of light telling us that another storm was coming. Thankfully, it was a natural one. Ahead, a fire seemed to be burning. Normally, we would have moved away from this, but my father urged us forward. "This is not a place for a fire that large," he said. The fire's size was because it was no simple cooking fire. A house was aflame, and though of little importance to us, 2 people lay outside of it. "Leave them," Namase urged my father. But my father, as well as Risa, went forward into the clearing, grasping the 2 people under their arms and dragging them back into the cover of the brush. "Take off their heads," said Nurokas. "They will be better without them." Their faces were blackened and bleeding. It was a man and a woman. The man had his fingers removed, and his leg had multiple long cuts. Into his chest, his attackers, or better worded, torturers, inscribed runes forming the word deceiver. He was no longer breathing. My father closed his eyes with his hand. The woman was still breathing and had very little injuries, but her head was swollen on one side, and from her nose came blood. Her eyes opened and she smiled, looking at me. "The elves have come to take me away," she said. "You are here because we did not tell them." Her eyes were soft and she forced a cracked smile, coughing. My father opened a pouch on his belt and rubbed an herbal mixture over her head. The bleeding ceased. He rested his hand on her head. "The injuries are perhaps too severe now," he said. "I am well," she whimpered. "Thank you, kind elf. Please tell the gods of our deeds. Perhaps they may grant us passage to their halls beyond the polar lights." Her voice was weak and raspy, and her eyes were heavy. "What happened here?" my father asked. "The Legion came. They threatened us, wishing for us to tell them whom we had seen. They believed those of magic were going this way, and of course they were right, but we would not tell them. We had seen many going north. I even helped hide some of them for a time a few days ago. They said they were going north to a safe place. Dear elves, please know, even as they tortured my husband, we would not give in. I blacked out before such horror could be done to me. But I have gifts. I could sense their thoughts. They plan to kill many near Taria, or perhaps they already have. I am tiring now. The gods thank you for your loyalty to the ways of magic, my father told her. Beware, dear elf. I feel that they know what your people do. They will not have mercy on you. Those were the last words the woman said. My father draped a branch over her and the man, and with an incantation over each, he waved the branch. Dirt covered their bodies, and flowers sprung from the ground. This way is now watched, Namase said. What good has our path been to avoid the obvious ways if they search for us along the same road we take? It was watched before. We must only hope the great host is still veiled and has not been attacked. The rain started again. The drops covering the burning house sizzled as we began again into the woods. The morning hour would come before we knew it. And so it was with haste that we went toward the northern road. My father and Namase spoke back and forth. I, at first, was too far back to hear, but I made it within earshot of them and noticed that they spoke in the tongue of the elves. We must find the host of our people, my father said. You know that is not the plan agreed upon in Narisond. We are to get to the ships waiting at the coastline. Great struggles were made to provide that way for us to head north. If the roads are being searched, they will have found that place by now. The veil over the host, if holding, is all that can protect them. The host marches up the road through Taria itself. It was agreed, Loria, we must follow our orders. You and your daughter were to go this way and then to the sea. The host is not your concern. Is it not a concern of yours? Do you not have kin going that way? Namase pointed at him. I made a commitment to guard you and your daughter. I told her I would not leave your side until you were safely in the city. They both stopped walking, as did the others, their conversation now public considering its volume had gained. Tell me of her mother's wishes, my father said. Tell me what I do not have the wisdom to know myself. Namase looked down. Forgiveness, my friend. I worry greatly in these times. I cannot speak of my own suffering as of late. That he said in the common language. That we all feel, elf, said Nurokas. I do not know your words, but if there is a debate about something, please do not make choices without us dwarves. Our two peoples have spent much time to forge this bond in the past months. We must speak only truth and not mislead, whether on purpose or not, in these times. My father spoke without hesitation. A path was arranged for us to get to the northern city in advance of a traveling host of elves and dwarves who make their way slowly, but under a magical veil that makes them invisible to even the most prying eyes. It is very much like what I summoned for us earlier, but actually removes those under it from the reach of this realm to protect them. If they are not within this realm, I see no worry. They cannot be touched, Nuroka said. The Itsu may have a way around the veil if they know of its presence. There is much we do not know, but they could be journeying into a trap. We may not be able to provide much of a hope, but we know they should be entering Taria before too long. If we can meet them, perhaps we can help them to remain hidden longer. My powers are more for healing, but the more elves under the veil, the stronger it is. Nurokas nodded. I know of another path. It is a way that takes us under the bay to the north, and will take us to the city we all seek. It is where Slatnikor and I were headed. Like you, we were traveling separate from that host, but we ended up heading the same way to avoid a run-in with the legions. I have a fear that we are being quarried by untimely events. Is this path easily taken? There are many by the bay, hidden by ruins. The paths must be known of to be found, but any person, be you beast, elf, or dwarf, can take them. My father nodded. So we can take another path that will be safer for all and slip away from the grasp of men and southern gods alike. We must do it." There were confirming nods amongst all present. "Then upon reaching the northern road, we will find our host and then turn to you, dwarf. You can direct us to these paths, the tunnels under the bay." It was decided. We were to meet up with the host of our peoples traveling together under the enchanted veil. I did not know how we would find them, but my skill was in archery, not in alchemy or magecraft as my father. I wondered if my mother would be among this host, but I knew better than to hope. She was in Narisond. I feared it would be there she would remain. We reached the road just as the rain slowed again, and soaking wet, I stared down a hill that went for a good while before the road snaked to the left in the trees. "This is good," Naroka said. "We are not too far from one of the tunnels whichever way we go from here." He pointed toward a towering rock formation in the woods. It was triangular and overgrown with brush. When the dwarves first settled this region, that was a tower for watching over across the bay. It is one of many, and between those you will find our tunnels that lead north. Why did we not know of the tunnels sooner? Was this place not made for all of us? Namase questioned. Indeed, the city upon the mountain was. However, the place we traveled to was that of my kin for long before this. Within the mountains beneath the city, the snow dwarves made homes well before we drew the breath of life. Speak for yourself. The elf laughed. What must we do to find the host? Asked Risiaya. My father looked to the sky. The sun was just starting to creep up, and beneath heavy clouds a cool wind blew upon us. They must be around a day away. I knew they were set to leave around 4 days after us. We have journeyed for 5½ days now, but their path was more direct. I expect them to pass this way either tonight or early tomorrow. Or we could go toward them if an attack is expected. Would it not be better to get to them sooner? He nodded. Is it fine for us to leave this place, dwarf? Nurokas raised his hand. If that is what is needed, it is fine. We must only get to the bay. There are many tunnels, and both I and Slatnikor here know of them all. He patted Slatnikor on the back. I made him memorize the locations in case we were separated or I fell ill. We began heading south. The path was quicker at times due to the downhill slant, but rolling hills were not easy on legs already weakened, even with the strength of elven blood. I do not know how time passed as fast as it did, but nightfall rapidly approached. We slowed our travel and took to a spot off the main road. My father stated he needed quietness and meditation to pierce the veil with his mind. I did not understand what he meant, but we remained quiet. I switched the string from my bow with a fresh one. Twine made from the hair of an elven mare did not easily break, but I liked to keep the bow well. Raisaa took notice of my actions and sat down next to me. You do well to keep your bow as you do. You will be renowned for your archery someday. I looked to him. It seems I will not have a chance. We go into hiding now. Nothing lasts. In my 1854 years that I do know, I have seen many happenings, many people I felt would last forever. Like a flower withering are we all in truth. At the height of bloom, magnificent, but no one knows when poison shall strike your roots. He rubbed his head. I find it hard to remember many things I once did. The sickness? It is early for me. Perhaps time will be given to me in the city we journey to. I understand a cure of some kind will be created. I hope to make it until then. Namase, though, may not be so lucky. I looked over and noticed how the elf was very unnerved, a quality not elvish at all. He twitched every few moments and seemed very annoyed. He has not accepted his fate, and he will not. It is not his personality. When did he tell you he was ill? He has not. It was after returning from his journey east, looking for our path to take, that he has not acted himself. It must be the sickness. But he will not tell me. Of other worries I too have had. I wish to defend the youth, those like you, those who will see the evils of this world defeated. The hiding we go to cannot be the end. The Elven and Dwarven councils would not have simply surrendered. Alas, they have not, Neurokas whispered, joining us. There is a plan, one that will save our kind and weaken the gods of the south. It is one unlikely to have been thought a path before, but one that will take all of our kin to succeed. I dare not speak of it here, though. Just know that those who have remained have a particular purpose. I immediately thought of my mother. I took after her as it was with my archery. Perhaps she was part of this plan. Elf, I heard from behind me. I turned to see Slatnikor nibbling a piece of meat, offering me a piece. I obliged him and took it. I know we do not know one another, but this place we go will be a home for all. I am happy we will be safe there. I feel the same, I replied. He smiled at me, and though his scruffy look and unkempt demeanor left much to what I would call civilized, I did not fail to see his kindness. Namaste, my father said. The elf turned to him, and Risa jumped to his feet. My father pointed and walked into the road. Come now, Namaste said to us. He closed his eyes, and I noticed a tear forming in the edge of his eye. It was strange, and I didn't understand. We filed behind my father, who stood with his hand out. We took hands and formed a line as one by one, each person was enveloped and disappeared from sight. I saw a bright light, and then my eyes adjusted. I was still on the road. I looked at my sides, and the arrow points from other elves stared at me with their jagged heads. I gasped, and they were lowered almost as quickly as I saw them. An entire front rank of my people stood before me, with their moon crescent shields and large spears gleaming from the moonlight above. My father began walking past them, and I looked past him, spotting many young elves and dwarves in the procession. Grand Master, Neurokas said. He went to another dwarf in heavy black armor. It is good to see you, my friend. The stout dwarf was taller than the rest. Neurokas, I did not expect you here. I understood that none would be able to find us once veiled. My father was now embracing an elf who emerged from the host. Lennius, one of the highest of elven society, was a moon color, a high archon mage, and one of the few who harvested the magic of the moon itself to spread to the living world. It was his staff, floating high above the host, that emanated the veil and protected all within it. You know you should not have come here, but I dare say you have news for us to risk the veil as such. I do hope none saw you enter it. Lennius, the veil may have already been found. We have knowledge that those of the world know of this procession, and to attack it. The dwarves we met in the woods here have found a new path, one that is more secret. This is Neurokas and Slatnikor. They will take us to it. Neurokas bowed. How many survivors do you have? Our host is greater than 5,000, but of warriors we do have much less. Most of them remained in Narisond. If we are attacked, we have far too little in guards, my father said. I suggest we take the dwarven path to lead us to safety. We cannot wait any longer on this road. You know what risk we face, and as powerful as your veil is to discern, we must take care to assure there will not be a need to test its strength. I was the first to notice the oddness of Namases's actions, but his brother saw him nearly as quick. Namase began to shake uncontrollably. Linnaeus backed slowly away, as did we all who stood around Namase. Brother, what is it? Risaya shouted. His brother was no longer in control of his own body. From his chest, a light burst forth, enveloping him in strands of fire. A line of elvish shields formed in front of Linnaeus. What trickery is this? He said. Namase did not speak or even give attention to the Archon's question. He drew his bow, and even as his brethren and his brother followed suit, he released his arrow toward the staff high above the great host. The fires wrapping around his body followed the arrow's path, and in an explosion of light and trembling that shook the ground, the staff was broken and the veil shattered. A wave of heat struck all of us beneath it. Namasse fell, pierced by elvish arrows, as the entire host fell into disarray. They had been waiting. From the skies above, dread beasts screamed and swooped down. I turned, drawing an arrow, but found myself surrounded by men of the legions. I could see beyond their interlocked shields, their pale, homely faces, and the fear in their expressions. I fired, catching one in the eye. Horns sounded behind me, and a rush of elvish shields collided with the shields of the legions. I heard a loud shout, and Neurokas and Slatnikor ran past me, striking into the shield wall and knocking them back. My father was beside me, as well as Risa, who released his arrows in quick succession. "Get your daughter to the woods, Loria!" Risa commanded. I could hear the screams of the young and the wails of babies. The sky darkened above, and swirling flames whipped downward, cutting into them. Bolts of ice flew from elven mages within the ranks of people, and in response, the storm clouds above opened to meteors that struck into the ground all around us. The lesser archons formed magical wards around the children, but were soon overwhelmed. The dying screams of the children carried on the winds between the battle cries and clanging of metal. Risa shouted again, "Loria!" I turned to see a stone falling from the heavens covered in fire. My father reached for a potion and tossed it to the ground. An arching tree grew from sapling to elder in a single breath, and then was engulfed in flames as its trunk took the brunt of the fiery stone. Shrieking pierced my ears. I turned to see one of the winged creatures land a few paces from us. It was just as the one from before, but more massive, and it reeked of rotting corpses. "Angrast!" an elf cried out. "Angrast the Devourer!" A barrage of bolts flew from the elves behind us, and the creature snarled, flapping its wings. A cloud of spikes struck us, gnashing into my father, as well as Neurokas, and most all of the elves from behind us who had fired at it. Most of those elves collapsed, gripping the poisoned bolts. I felt along myself. My gauntlet had caught one, but I was well. My father had taken one to his shoulder, but appeared okay. Neurokas looked to Slatnikor. "Do well, young one." He dropped his axes and unslung his hammer from his back. "Do you wish the blood of yet another Hammersong Angrast?" The creature paused, snarling. "Yes, I know your name. You attacked us before at Herodar. Are you not yet filled with dwarves for your unceasingly rank belly? Have me!" The creature growled and flashed its teeth. The dwarf swung his hammer, and with a harsh tone ringing out, he struck the beast. It flew backward into several trees, splintering them beneath its weight. It rolled, and then with claws tearing the earth, it ran back toward us. My father sprinted forward, tossing another bottled potion. This one burst with a brilliant bright light that forced the creature back, cowering. Neurokas raised his hammer again and struck it, but this time the creature swung its wing, severing the dwarf's arm, splashing dwarvish blood into the trees. "Master!" yelled Slatnikor. The young dwarf went to go forward when Neurokas pointed with his remaining hand. "No," he coughed, spitting blood. He lifted his hammer up. "Go, go, Slatnikor!" My father shouted after another bright flash from another of his potions. "Risa! Get her and the dwarf to safety!" I felt a grip on my arm, and Risa pulled me away. Slatnikor looked toward me before glancing back to the Hammersong and my father still fighting the beast. He waited a moment before running to follow us. We ran through the woods. Around us, the forms of others fleeing in every direction was coupled with the sound of agony as arrows from unseen boughs cut them down. "Metla!" Risa shouted. It was an elvish arrow spell. He pulled his arrow back and shot it into the tree ahead. A bright light flashed, and for a moment there was enough light to loose arrows. I pulled back the elf mare string, looking down the well-fletched shaft. The silver armor of the evil man who had somehow gained the dexterity to climb into the tree was in full form behind the barbed tip of my arrow. My fingers released. In a motion, I grasped another arrow and then another, looking for other forms in the trees until I had released multiple shots. Risea had done as I had, and there were a series of thuds before the woods went quiet and the spell Risaya had cast darkened. Risa laughed and nodded. "Very good. As I told you, you will be great." I turned to smile at him when the shoulder of his armor exploded into flames from a black bolt fired from high above. I turned, drawing my arrow back and aiming to the sky. A winged beast flew toward me. I lowered, attempting to fire before it was upon me. I could see its mouth agape, its clawed feet and its hands out. I was just about to release my shot when Slatnikor cut it down with his axe. "Argy!" he growled, giving a second strike to the creature he had brought to the ground, severing its head before spitting on it. I turned to Risa, who was now on his knees and gasping. "You are injured!" Just go. Go with the dwarf to the waters and be free from this wretched land." He struggled to his feet and drew an arrow. It was then there was shouting. "More of them! Over here!" He pushed me. "Go!" He turned toward the shouting, drawing his bow back even as I saw sanguine flesh running down his side. I looked toward Slatnikor, who began running again through the woods. I could hear the repeated twangs and screams of agony behind us as Risa, elf of Narisond, gave his stand to the legions of men. He would punish many, giving us time to escape. Perhaps my father would find him before it was too late. I spotted a glimmer on the water of the bay, the moonlight shrouded in smoke from the fires and hell behind us. I wept thinking of my father and of Risaya, along with all that had been lost. There was a strange movement on the water, and I stopped to stare. There were ships, hundreds, their masts a pale white on the dark waters, rapidly approaching the distant coastline. I shook my head and bowed. I was sure the legions did not need these reinforcements this horrid night. Slatnikor took hold of my hand and pulled me on. We came to a rocky shore, and the dwarf went to a rocky outcropping. A cylindrical stone was hidden inside a small pillar beside the water. He did something to it with his hand, and two crystalline stones appeared. He twisted them, and a cave emerged. "This is the way. Once we go through, it will seal behind us. We will be safe." With the stench of death in the air, I closed my eyes and followed the dwarf in. I felt myself rush forward, and then opened my eyes to a dimly lit passage. Looking behind me, I saw only a wall of stone. "We must go this way," Slatnikor said. I paused and looked down to the ground. "Did you hear me?" I nodded and then followed him. The center of my chest burned, and my throat felt heavy. I could not get the sounds of the children screaming out of my mind. We came to a pool many hours after entering the cave. The water was cold. When you felt the air itself getting colder, the last wish you had was for more cold. I took some drinks and turned down more of the meat from the dwarf. "How much longer?" "I do not know," he told me. We had traveled for many more hours, or perhaps it was a few days. I was tired with many nights of no sleep. We at last paused and took some time to have a few hours of rest. When I awoke, we continued the same as before. I did not know for sure how much time had passed when at last the paths turned warmer and I began to see more light ahead. We ascended into a larger passage, and then up ahead I spotted a light and a shadowed form. "Who goes there?" a voice shouted. Slatnikor responded. Slatnikor of Haradar and an elf of Narisond. As we approached, other figures appeared, and then one of them ran off. As we reached the figures, we noticed it was more dwarves. "Welcome, Slatnikor, and you, elf." The dwarf was shorter than the ones from Haradar. His eyes were foggy gray, and ice glistened from his brow and beard. "We are the snow dwarves, builders of the city of Elinathrond." "Then we made it?" I asked. Up above us, a large door opened, and I could see dazzling lights of green and blue shining across the sky. An image appeared and then paused in the doorway. "It is true!" the figure shouted. The figure ran down the stairwell and across the bridge before I recognized him. It was my father. He took me in his arms. "I had thought you lost when I was brought here and could not find you." "How did you?" I began, but then tears filled my eyes. I did not care of how. I was too happy to speak. "After the Hammersong and I defeated the creature, many men from ships upon the bay, attacked the legions from behind. We fled north for some time and then made it to a tunnel as soon as we could." "Neurokas is here?" asked Slatnikor. "No, dear dwarf. He suffered poisoning from andgrast, as did I, but my herbs did not work quick enough. I am sorry. His body is among the others who died after our arrival. Go into the city, and they will show you to him." Slatnikor followed one of the other dwarves, leaving my father and me alone. "The sacrifice of Rissa is one not taken lightly. He will be remembered. When he was found, the bodies of over 50 men of the Legion surrounded him. His bow was broken in two, and he had taken to using the splintered arm of it to defeat his foes." I walked with him back toward the large door and stepped onto the white ground that crunched beneath my feet. Snow. I had read of it but had never seen it. I reached down. It was soft in my hands. The city before us was massive. Spread out before us, I could see no end to it. Above the snow-covered buildings, high in a starlit sky, was a glimmering ribbon of green-hued lights unlike any I had ever seen. The god Wura protects this city. The polar lights are his pathway, and his temple is within these walls. The curse cannot get us here. I walked with my father. The city streets were alive with people of magic from all over the lands. We made our way to a large city square. Shops and carts of all kinds lined its edges, and men in red robes watched as others directed people to different regions of the city. They held staves that glowed with a radiant light. My father pointed. "Priors of the war god, Kel. They guard us against the world of men." So many had come to this place, but the relief of stress was far from me. My mind was on the events that forced us here. We came at last to a path leading east of the square. I spotted a large structure. A single spire rose into the sky above sharply angled stone walls. Massive windows splashed orange light onto the snow. We paused for a moment, and my father looked to me, a warm comfort in his eyes. "The estate of Elinathrond at last. We have made it, my child. The hope of many now fallen, but it is here we will stop this curse." I looked up at him, and a tear rolled down my cheek. He wiped it and smiled. "Peri, we are safe now." That was long ago now. His words still echo in my mind, a comforting thought, a whisper of forsaken memory. Of the elf Namasse and his actions on the road in Taria, it was discussed in times afterward with those with gifts of foresight and psychic ability. Namasse had found he was sickened with the very curse we fled from, and searched all the lands for a cure himself in the months before our flight. In those times he was stricken with another curse unlike any had seen. What compelled him to act as he did was a deliberate move by the Itsu, a deemed blood curse called the Rites of the Damned. He did not act of his own will. I do not hold him to his actions. I forgive him now, but of the cries of the children and the defenseless, I am haunted still. In the darkness of the far north I remain, but in this icy emptiness I wither and weep. We are no longer safe. It was never to last, this city in the mountains. Mere days ago, someone burned my father alive in the winery, and the elixir he crafted to protect the people when the city's protection failed to hold back the curse is no more. Elinathrond has turned to that of a beckoning crypt, open and awaiting the next fall of the sun to claim more lives. A new winemaker comes to continue my father's work, but an outsider has no place here. There is something else moving within the shadows, and I am fearful of coming darkness. The end. For more from this story, check out Rogues of Magic by J.T. Williams, available in both ebook and audiobook, wherever you read or listen. Thank you for listening.